Now, my real life situation is this picture. And in this picture, there are a bunch of people in orange jumpsuits with black bags over there. Now, the reason why I chose this as one of my pictures is because it shows two things. One, you can either take it as propaganda, or you can take it as fear, and why you should fear as a militia. Now, these are some of my thoughts and questions that first came to mind when I did this presentation, when I actually saw this photo. And one of the leading questions that came to mind is, who actually took the photo? As you can see, before, in the photo, it does not mention the photographer or where the location is. Also, one of the questions that came to mind is, what will happen next? What will these people, be doing, or what happens? And it made me feel sad, because usually with these lovely people, things do not end up very well for them. Okay, so my knowledge question is, what are the ethical limitations of acquiring and recording knowledge? And from this question, I put into a specific question, are there any limitations on what should be photographed? And in addition to this, I also ask, who decides what limitations are there? Now, since it's ToK, you have to mention your ways of knowing and your areas of knowledge. And in my areas of knowledge, I'm mentioning ethics. Ethics is my area of knowledge. My ways of knowing are sense perception and language. And the reason why I put language up there is because my English teacher told me this. All forms of communication, written or visual, count as a text. And pictures count as a visual text. They give you emotions. They make you feel in a certain way, and they manipulate you, if you think about it. Now, my perspective on the topic is that there should not be any limits to war photography at all. That war photography should be as it is, and there shouldn't be a public or political opinion about it. And this also continues with the freedom of rights and the freedom of speech. And transparency is the best policy. I've heard this quote from an economist somewhere, but transparency is the best policy. And this involves transparency with the government to the citizens, as well as the media to the citizens. And the media and the government are two different things. Now, the ethical limitations on the media. I'm talking about the claims first, which is the government. And the government says that they have the right, the government does not control all the media. The media, that for example BBC or The Guardian or Al Jazeera, they have their own industry, but the government can censor certain things. And so, the claim that the media has, and the government, is that they are allowed to show anything, within reason, of course. They also believe that they're doing a duty by spreading awareness. It counts as a service, and it shows what's happening around the world. If you think about it, without BBC or Al Jazeera or any of those, would we really know what happened in the Paris attack, or in Lebanon, or in anywhere around the world? We wouldn't be able to know, because the media plays such a big role in influencing our lives. Now, the counterclaims, though. The counterclaims are, is the government to be biased? Because the government censors everything, right? So are we actually learning the full truth? Do we actually know what's actually happening, or what one side of the argument says is happening? Another limitation is, does this promote the country and government's ideals? For example, in movies, when you watch Star Wars, does it ever come and occur to you that Star Wars is actually made to show America versus communism? No. Or an American Sniper. They glorify the American while they make the Arabs look pretty bad. I'm sorry guys, but that's what the movie was about. And in other movies nowadays, the government tries to manipulate you to think in a certain way, and it plays with your emotions. Now okay, there's no children in the room, great. I'm going to be showing some graphic photos next, and I'll be explaining some ethical limitations on them. For example, the Hunger Games. The reason why I gave it this title is because there's a starting child. The Hunger Games is taken by Kevin Carter in South Sudan in 1993 and 1994. Now, one of the ethical limitations on this is, do you really want to see how bad a famine is, or do you already know how bad a famine is? Do you want to see a starving child? Do you want your children, or in our case, the youth, do you want the youth to see this? Is it ethical to show the audience of what's happening? Another photo that I found, it's called The Last Chance. It's taken by Eddie Adams in Vietnam, 1968. This is during the Vietnamese War. And there are as long as if any of you know the photo, the girl running with no clothes on because she was burnt by napalm. There's that photo as well. And the ethical limitations that come out of this are, there's a guy being shot. Do you think that the people, the audience, should see this? Or do we already know that war is bad enough and lives are being lost? We're becoming more recent. This is 2001, guys. Whoopee. More recent and a lot more gore. Now, this soldier has been shot, as we can see. Now, since the soldier is alive, do you think that soldier has a say in whether his photo should be published or not? A lot of the media doesn't think so. A lot of the media says, well, I should post it because it's showing what's happening. While the family and the injured think, well, I don't want to be presented as me being weak or me being wounded. Why should I be up here? And this also brings me to another recent crisis, Pebbles Stones. Of course, a lot of you know about the Palestine-Israeli crisis. I'm sorry, the name is not south. But with this, do you think we should take a picture of a child throwing stones, or should we actually help the child and bring them to safety? This is all criticizing the photographer. What's the photographer's role? And is it really ethical to take pictures of such tragedies and not help in them? Children in Arms, 2013. This boy is 9 years old. He's smoking and holding a gun. Does this promote violence? It could, because the child's holding a gun, you know. And the child is smoking. Does this promote teenagers or young people to smoke as well just because this kid's doing so? Or should the people see such, like, don't you think this photo's up? Yeah. A young child is defending a military base because they don't have enough recruits. I think that's a horrible way to represent what's happening. Last but not least, I found this the most interesting, because this is our home, Lebanon, walking in ruins. Stephen Ellering in 2007, right when the war ended. Instead, the photographer took the time to actually take the photo, instead of helping the man in the photo look for survivors, or look for other things they own, or help clean up. Does the photographer's only role have to be photography, or can they aid? Can they help? And that's where I get to the ethical limitations of the photographer and photography. Now, the photographer believes it's their duty to show the public what's happening. There's a quote by Robert Capa that says, if your pictures aren't good enough, you aren't close enough. And this shows how motivated the photographers are and how determined they are to take such gruesome photos to show the world of what's happening. Another quote that's mentioned by Michel Zhang says, the number of conflict photographers covering wars has dwindled by 40% over the past 15 years. The organization says, but without them, we would never know the realities of war. Of course, the photographers have a point. If we didn't have these pictures I've shown you, would you actually really know what's happening? Would you be able to understand how bad and how gruesome war may be? Maybe, from the articles. But a lot of people say pictures hit you stronger than words. Now it's time for the counterclaims. And the counterclaims are a lot. Because Each question has their own subtext. For example, in the first question, if the picture involves a dead human, does the family have a say in whether or not the photo should be aired? Yeah. This is one of the questions. As well, should the photo be exploited? Aired is something different from exploit. Exploit is when you misuse the picture, while airing is just showing what's happening. And for example, this photo, the one I've showed you before, many of them, do you think the photo is used as a condolence, or is it used to manipulate you in a way to show that somebody else has more power? Why do we use photos as propaganda? Another one of the ethical issues that came up was, do the injured even have a say? For example, if I've been shot and someone took a picture of me, do I have a say whether the picture or not should be aired? And one of my friends actually told me this. If it's a picture of just a scene of a battle, he said that they should not have opinion. Well, I disagree. Why shouldn't he? He's part of the picture. It's his life that's in there. It's his battleground. Imagine if someone took a picture of your home, all of it, but you don't have a say in it because you're just one of the many items or many people in your home. Is that ethical? Are you allowed to just take a picture of some space without considering the lives that are in it? And of course, there is the question, do we need to know how gruesome war is? We already know that a lot of people are being killed. For example, in Vietnam, we know that napalm has scarred so many people. Do we actually need to see it for our own eyes? Another question was, do the photographers actually know what's going on? A lot of them go in there thinking, oh yeah, this will be a walk in the park, I'll take some more photos and I'll be out. Well, a lot of them have been shot. This goes on to my conclusion. There should be transparency in the media. That was one of the big conclusions I came up with. There should be transparency in the media. Another one of them was, should the photographer should be aware of what's going on. They should be aware of how dangerous their job is. Another conclusion I came up with is the family should be notified that their son or daughter or their uncle or aunt or anyone that's related to them that died, that their photo is being exploited. And there's some questions I come up with. Should the media even be controlled at the end? Do we really need someone keeping an eye on it? Or should we know the full truth of what's happening? And if you say yes to the above question, but how? How are we supposed to control the media? And before I end it, there is another thing for the counterclaims. Does the viewer become immune to such gory photos? Like for example in video games. All of us have played Call of Duty once or twice. All of us have played Mortal Kombat. Do you think you're less used to the violence now because you're playing such games? Or you're seeing such photos like this? And that's it. Thank you. We're excited.
I wanted to hang out with one of the counterclaims.
Yes.
One of the counterclaims was if we should or should not see these photos.
Yes.
And also, why is the photographer taking these photos?
Yes.
And what I believe is that it's not a question if we should or should not see these photos. It's that we have to see these photos. Because without these photos and without this inspiration that art and photography gives, without empathy, without the emotion that you get through these pictures, such as the baby and the vulture, or the kid against the humongous tank, no one would be moved to make change. No one would be moved to save anything. So in fact, instead of saving that one man, or trying to look for survivors, he's not only helping this man, but he's helping the entire space that he's in, because he's not only spreading awareness of it, he's considering empathy and giving it meaning. He's making it known.
You could take that point of view, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But then there's also the other point of view. Eddie Adams, Kevin Carter, the person who took the photo of the Hunger Games, he committed suicide 4 months later, after that photo, because he couldn't help a starving child. So do you think that it would be ethical for you just to leave out what you could have done, or what you could have done? Every inch is significant. Every purpose, every touch, every feel, every coin, every penny, every dollar, everything's significant, no matter how small it may be. And just taking a photo, you're right. Taking a photo does show awareness. I'm not saying it doesn't, but does it show enough awareness? A lot of people don't take these photos into consideration because they're so used to all the other photos in the past.
Sadly, I know of this story and this tragedy, and I believe that this was an internal conflict with the photographer, but I'd also like to offer a counterpoint. Such photos as baby dying on the beach of Syria has moved the entire EN and the UN to action towards stopping the war in places such as Syria. And such photography, such as you said, Little Penny, Every Little Thing Helps, such photography is a movement, it's a revolution as compared to saving this one child. Okay, you lost this one child, okay, you didn't save this one child, but you saved all the other hungry, starving children who were not able to see. The other people, the other brutalities we are not exposed to because of the censorship from the media and the government.
Well, it depends on what you mean by save. You could say that a lot of the people in that family got aid, or you could look at it from the perspective that America, one of the certain laws that they've done is America has made these laws that only things that are made in America are allowed to go to the people in the family. And America did not do as much aid as they should. I'm not saying you're wrong. You're right to some extent.
All these pictures of, sad to say, great children and all these different things, moving pictures, are supposed to inspire people. There's so many of them, there's so much data available, so many pictures available on the internet and all over the place throughout media. People stop taking them seriously. Especially the last picture of the Syrian child who died. Many people started to make fun of that picture just because they lost this connection to these pictures. They lost their sense of emotion towards these different things.
I agree with you. So you should know that once there's when there's so much of something, you become used to it. When there's so much war photography, people do not sense how much meaning it has, but they'll just say, oh, it's another war photo. Alright. Last question?
I have a point to add and then a question.
Of course.
The point regarding what you're saying is that taking into account how media helped in the revolutions within the past 15 years, we can never deny the role of such pictures in moving people. So the minute you started your presentation, me as being a beginner ToK teacher, I was thinking to myself, why haven't you taken along with ethics, emotions? What about the appeal, emotional appeals? You were talking all the time, and I was saying, why didn't you take ethics and emotions and their influence, and what is the role of emotion into answering the question whether these pictures are ethical for the community or not? So I would like you to tell me why you have chosen to take it solely from the ethical perspective.
Well, because emotions are very hard to understand. People react to different photos differently. And if I were to take that route, I would have to explain a whole different field of emotions and how pictures can manipulate or can make people go against. And this will evolve to...
You could have taken a stand, a personal one.
I could have, yes.
But I think, if I may, I think the focus of this conference is actually on ethics. So this is one reason why we chose to go down the road of ethics.
They cannot combine like two.
Of course they can, but it's really up to the student's decision.
Okay.
The student is the voice of the learning.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I know you said that was the last question, but I also I agree, and when you were talking about the claim and the counterclaim, from what I understood is that the claim, in some sense, like that this is their job to make the society aware that a photographer who doesn't take these type of pictures that notify the society what's going on isn't a good photographer, from what I understood. But then your counterclaim is that the society even needs to be like exposed to the gruesomeness of war, etc., etc. So I just want to make sure, like, I'm understanding your point of view is that photographers have the right to do what they do, but there should be like transparency in how they do it.
There should be consideration. Like, for example, if I'm taking a photo of a dead person, I should at least take the family's consideration of it and seeing if that photo should be exploited or not. And the whole point of transparency, yes, there should be transparency. That was one of the counterclaims, that once for example, the photographer is, of course, going to have to show this photo to, BBC or CNN, and that goes to the government, and everything is censored sometimes. And so your question is that, can you repeat?
No, just the question is that I just want to understand your point of view is that you agree that photographers have the right to do what they do, but when they do it, there should be some sort of an extent where they consider the people involved, and they, instead of maybe just taking a picture of like a 9-year-old who's holding a gun, that they should actually report this or somehow manage to stop it.
Yes, instead of just taking the photo solely, you should like try to help the child. It should, like, my view is that there should be transparency, but there should also be aid. Like if I'm taking a photo of a starving child, I should help and aid them as well. And I'm sorry guys, the time's up. I do hope you have a good day.